So we got some good news announced today because there was rumors about there being a 13th episode of this season, and now we have official confirmation that the final episode that is airing next week will be quote-unquote an hour long, but 40 minutes give or take, because 30 minutes is what they advertise for a normal TV-length episode, so that just means that episodes 12 and 13 are being bundled into one, and we will get an extra long episode next week to leave us off on Season 3. And given the explosive bombshell that they decided to end this episode with the whole idea of studying abroad, but having it happen so abruptly that there isn't going to be a next year culture festival, and this is it, that he's skipping a year and going to study abroad. And it makes a lot of sense given his power moves in this episode. Miyuki was definitely acting a lot more forward in this episode, and not even just in the typical sense, more so he was doing like what you did in last week's episode, but doing so intentionally, like, I don't care if people think we're dating, let's go on a culture festival date if that's what it looks like. And it's gonna be an interesting ending, right? Because there's a couple of ways they could go about it. One, they announce their feelings here and now, or maybe only one of them will. I could see Miyuki announcing his feelings, but saying he wants to study abroad, and Kaguya, putting her own feelings behind, saying you gotta live your life, you have to be able to build the life that you want. Or maybe they'll try the long distance relationship, maybe she'll come with him. I'm not exactly sure, but drama and romance are going to go hand in hand next week. One way or another, those two are going to be in a very good harmony. Whether it means bittersweet, whether it means nice ending, I don't know, but I'm excited to see because, even before the season kicked off, the Culture Festival was the thing that source readers were hyping up the most. And I saw a lot of people happy that, there was supposedly an extra episode. So given that, it feels like everyone is going to leave next week probably feeling satisfied, even if they do decide to stab us in the heart on the way out. But this episode was very interesting because in a lot of ways, it almost felt like the calm before the storm, even though I wasn't expecting an actual storm. I thought there might be some drama with you and just his confession, but I wasn't expecting the jab to the heart about him leaving. And I thought that was a nice way to tie up this episode, all things considered. It was actually a pretty funny episode for the most part, and I like the fact that you have her just kind of confused about what to do with that confession, because you really did make it feel like it was a confession, even if he was oblivious to what actually happened. And I like the misunderstandings, whether it's her observing Chika and just like, okay, I guess we need to do a quiz game to turn people down, or Kaguya thinking that someone was setting him up for failure, and then in return, she almost made him just suffer a fate worse than death, before reeling it back in, saying, you know what, he was brave, so you should definitely consider his feelings. I like the idea of her being very, not knowing what to do, because she's used to the jock bros, those types of people confessing, and it's pretty easy to turn those types of people down. And even though she cares about him, that's why she's very confused, because on one hand, she has all these plans, and if she falls in love, she's going to focus on nothing other than him. And there's a lot of conflicting feelings, and because she genuinely cares for the guy, she doesn't know what to do. So the idea of her admitting what's going to happen next will be interesting, because in a lot of ways, something I didn't consider after the recent episodes was I wouldn't be shocked in the slightest if both sides, essentially confess, whether that's, you actually officially confess and getting rejected potentially, but also Miyuki and Kaguya confessing but deciding not to pursue it. That actually could be a likely possibility, because the idea of futures is something that it's very important. It's easy in the early stages of those high school years, but the idea of him wanting to study abroad and make a life for himself, unfortunately romance is something that seems to be something he's going to have to wait on. And I could see the same thing with you and everything like that and what they want to do. If that's the case, I'll be interested to see how they execute all that different things and maybe a fan-up reaction to it. But either way, the fact that it seems like it's impossible at this stage to not have them, at least one of them, confess their feelings, because a part of me wonders if he will confess and she'll decide not to return the feelings. Like, hey, if you return my feelings, I won't go study abroad. She decides to do the best thing for him. There's a lot of different things that I've seen not only just an anime, but just romance stories in general use, and then they eventually come back together. And I'm interested to see, because Kaguya has done a really good job at blending the serious and the goofy, but now it feels like we're officially entering full-on serious territory, and I'm excited to see what that means for the future of the show, especially with like a season 4 and things like that. But in terms of the actual funny stuff, I mean, there was a lot of really funny presentation choices. I love the side characters just not being overly in your face, but enough to navigate these lovebirds into working together, like the idea of her wanting him to build a heart-shaped balloon, right? And the fact that she can't explicitly say she wants a heart because that's the same as confessing, and the fact that you just have like Wing Girl over here being like, oh, you know, what about the heart? And just, it was just really fun to see all the different characters just say like, it's finally happening, god damn it. We're gonna do whatever it takes to make sure the confession officially happens. And of course, they drag it out a little bit, but I think it was warranted given where the episode ultimately went and how it concluded. I mean, Kaguya-sama just is a master at what it does in terms of visual directing, whether it's, you know, shifting up the character models and the color palette and things like that, or just making everything from prior episodes and sometimes even prior seasons feel like it all led to this moment. Like the fact that you have all these different characteristics and these traits, right? You know, you have Chika, who, if you're trying to do something important, you don't want this bundle of crazy energy to interfere. You being a gloomy zombie because he feels like, you know, the person he has a crush on is ignoring him. You want to ignore that. You know, just all these different things. And the fact that they can, within a matter of having like these situational jokes happen, they can play with visual design, making it feel like a classic Resident Evil video game, something like that, while they're simultaneously just trying to get to that objective, get to that obstacle that they can finally overcome and admit their feelings. And I mean, sometimes when you have that will they, won't they, and that dragging on, are they ever going to confess? I'm usually not the biggest fan. I'm typically the person who roots for it happening as soon as possible, because the shit that happens in a relationship is far more interesting than the stuff that happens prior to them in a relationship, more often than not. And the stuff that can be interesting prior to a relationship, it usually shouldn't last past a season. But Kaguya-sama's, you know, ever since I started covering this show back in season 1, it just felt like the longer they stayed out of it, the funnier it could be. And I think this could be the appropriate moment to really turn Kaguya-sama into something different, where it can still be goofy, whether they're in a relationship or they are friends abroad, things like that. But ultimately, it feels like this is the moment where the formula will finally change. And I think if that's true, 3 seasons worth of content, give or take, feels like the appropriate amount to transition, still feel like Kaguya, but still also feel like the ultra-romantic tagline that they used for this season wasn't in vain sort of a thing. I think rejection, separation, growing up, going to different schools, how do you keep in a relationship if you're going to 2 separate schools in 2 separate countries? There's a lot of really good things that can happen with the story, both on the dramatic and goofy side. And I think Kaguya-sama has proved to us over these 3 seasons that it knows what it's doing, and whatever it decides to land with, whether it's heartbreak, whether it's bittersweet, I love you, but we can't be together, or they find a way to make it work, I know for a fact that Kaguya-sama is going to prove to all of us that it knows what it's doing, and it's masterclass in the rom-com genre. But thoughts and feelings down below. What do you think, and what do you hope to see in that extra long episode next week? Leave a like if you enjoyed, and subscribe if you're new around here. So until next time, everyone, please take care and have a good one.